From the House, the program that keeps you up to speed with developments here at Parliament. My name is Asanda Mbeche. It's Constituency Day. The two houses of Parliament are not sitting. MPs are in their respective constituencies where they're expected to deal with matters affecting their communities. That gives us time to take stock of work done by members of Parliament over the past week. In our program today, the South African Cities Network gives an overall financial assessment of South Africa's 8 biggest municipalities. We bring you coverage of the Labour Portfolio Committee's public hearings into the Employment Equity Bill. And later in our program, we'll bring you coverage of a debate in the National Council of Provinces on the significance of Women's Day. Let's go to our first item. The country's metropolitan municipalities say they need more funding from national government if they're to deal with the effects of urbanization and fulfilling the objectives of the National Development Plan. The umbrella body of the cities, the South African Cities Network, says gross underfunding of the metros will have a knock-on effect on South Africa's economy. The South African Cities Network released its overall financial assessment of the 8 biggest municipalities in Parliament last week. Willelani Philip reports.
Local government is at the coalface of service delivery, and it's equally prone to service delivery protests. The Cities Network says some of these protests are caused by underfunding from the national government.
We think that time has arrived that we get a greater share of the national revenue and not keep it at the current levels of between 8 and 10%, at least over the last 10 years. We think it's grossly unfair, and thus we're making the point around grossly underfunded municipalities. And if then we have to recognize that there's a bulk of the population that is moving to cities, it means that with time, more poverty is going to be located in the metropolitan municipalities.
The report shows a mixed outcome in capital expenditure between 2011 and 2012. Johannesburg has decreased its capital spending by 11%. Cape Town went up by 39%. eThekwini dropped by 11%. Tshwane increased by 48%. Nelson Mandela Bay dipped by 35%, and Buffalo City fell by 36%. Some municipalities say their demand for increased funding could be based on conditionalities.
But I do think there is a possibility that national government can consider of a conditionality, that only if municipalities reach certain criteria in terms of using existing resources that they qualify to get additional funding. And I think it's not impossible to set up a set of criteria that would make that possible.
That indeed there's a fiscal gap. Now that fiscal gap has 2 components. There's a gap that relates to inefficiency in the current system. So if you were to look at the current revenue base or revenue source for local government, there is room to maximize and to sweat that revenue source. So within the sector, there is that ability to increase the revenue. But when you look at the total ability of municipalities to, even if they were to be efficient in their collection rates, do everything else right, there still remains a funding gap, and that funding gap is essentially a capital funding gap. Now, that nuance on capital funding is an important one because, and let me come maybe in dealing with that to the second question around the tariffs, the exponential growth in tariffs.
5 of the 9 municipalities under review received unqualified audit reports last year. Johannesburg, Nelson Mandela Bay, and Buffalo City received qualified reports, while the report for Mangaung is outstanding. Meanwhile, revenue collection has grown year on year since 2005.
To the end of March 2013, Nelson Mandela Bay municipalities revenue collection, the debt growth, bad debt growth was about 308 million. Now one can understand the reasoning behind. If you go through an exercise here, probably 80% of that is residential debt coming from the poor, caused by poor households who cannot afford to pay for their service. Although all municipalities provide assistance to the poor, what we call free basic services, which is funded through national government's equitable share. But the debt continues to grow, and there's very little one can do other than, you can't close a household down. You can't disconnect water. You can disconnect electricity. But other services do continue, like your rates. The rates cover all your services, like roads and street lighting and stormwater and all those type of things. You can't shut it down. So end of the day, it's a very difficult situation to generate your revenue. Generally people out there regard the municipality or a state of, organ of state as not an important role player in terms of their lives. It is an important role player, but in terms of payment for services, it's not important. It's like if we get a letter from one of the clothing stores, unpaid bill, we jump and we go and pay it because they're going to take some actions. Now, our bylaws, are, in my opinion, Councillor Badenhorst, are weak in a sense that we do not apply very stringent measures to collect our revenue. And that is not because we don't want to collect our money, but we also need to take the humane side of the community out there, and the policy must be humane, so we do not destroy the quality of life that's we're trying to improve all the time. So basically the collection of revenue the policies need to be seriously looked at again in terms of our bylaws and all over throughout the country for that matter. And also lastly is the important thing is that local government is dependent a lot on provincial government structures.
Just talk about this, why the municipalities should have more money. Why should they get more transfers? Now, I think before we even say why they should get more, let's say why they shouldn't get more. And why they shouldn't get more is they should be doing their collection more efficiently, they should be reducing their debt, they should be spending their capital transfers more efficiently, and they should be, above all, efficient in their budgeting. Because to a large extent, municipalities are budgeting by a simple add-on of a percentage in a year, and that's the budget. So you need to be more effective in your budgeting. Those three things said, then let's look at what's balanced against success. And a lot of it revolves around repairs and maintenance, because a lot of the government transfers at present moment are capital works that are putting in correctly so, by the way, that putting in infrastructure for the poorer section of the community. But that immediately has a knock-on effect in that money that you're investing in capital, in theory, you should have it working for you and earning you money to pay for the repairs and maintenance. But you're already behind the 8 ball on the repairs and maintenance. Because if you look at my city, I've got Mdansani, Ilita, Dimbaza, Zwelitsha, Bishu, and I think I've missed one. I've got all those municipalities where infrastructure was put in with inferior materials 50 years ago, and they are collapsing. We've had to rebuild the electrical reticulation in a number of those townships from square one, because that simply wasn't working. The same thing with the water supply. So you need extra money to be able to meet those repairs and maintenance and put them. At the present moment, it is true, repairs and maintenance is woeful. We spend 85–90% of our repairs and maintenance, but it is most probably only a third of what it should be. And it simply is, you've got to have, at the end of the day, you can't budget for a deficit. You've got to have a balanced budget. And that is an important aspect.
The cities have acknowledged that services are rising and becoming unaffordable, forcing households to be trapped in debt. Bulelani Philip for A View from the House in Parliament.
The Employment Equity Bill under scrutiny at a public hearing in Parliament. That's our story. After the break, stay with us.